Welcome to NEK VT Rocks. My guest today is Aaron Larsen. Aaron was very gracious and stepped in at the last minute. He is from Newport City Elementary School, and you're the assistant principal.
Yep.
And we're talking about re-entry into a system that is so crazy right now. Where on earth can you begin?
Yeah, it is. It's been a summer unlike any other trying to prepare for this, especially following the months of not having kids in the building.
Right. And the bouncing ball as the rules keep changing.
Yeah, they have been changing, and there's things we've asked for clarification on, and you kind of get it when the state's ready to give it to you. So,
which means they didn't know either, mostly.
I think not knowing is a big part of everything that's been happening. It's just, this is unprecedented times.
Mm-hmm.
It's unprecedented for school-age children to have 6 months without being in school. It's unprecedented for us to try to respond to that.
Right, and teachers having to learn to teach totally differently over Zoom or whatever others without adequate resources to be able to do that in places like Newport and Derby and the whole of the NEK for that matter.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for a lot of folks to try to figure out that new reality and how to do it. I think teachers really want to do a good job. That's at the forefront of everything that they're doing. So, I think when there's anxiety and when there's stuff like it's because they just want to do their best job.
Right.
So it's really, I think, the job of administration, Elaine Collins, who's the principal, and myself to try to help them.
So on September the 8th, that's D-Day, right?
It is.
How is this all going to happen? What's going to happen?
Smoothly, no problems at all. It's going to be interesting.
So the kids will be picked up by bus as usual, or are they supposed to walk here?
Well, we do have a certain group of our kids who walk to school, and we have some parent drop-offs, and we'll have busing, and it's going to look pretty similar to how it has in the past. The busing, they're allowing us to have run a full load of kids at this point.
So they're not doing this 6-foot distance and
not on the buses. They've allowed us to open. The state has kind of devised a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and they're allowing us to open the buses up at the least restrictive level. So we'll try to do some groupings on the buses so that kids are staying with their class cohorts or with family members, so we're not cross-contaminating. We'll have spots on the buses for kids who don't have a health screening to provide us, so the kids that have to have that health screening again.
And do they wear masks on the bus?
Yeah, they'll wear masks. And we'll have assigned seats so we can do contact tracing should we have a case, so we'll know where kids are. We're also going to have additional paraeducators, bus monitors on the bus to help supervise all of this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you need more volunteers for a lot of this? It's a lot of bodies you're needing for tasks that you never had to do before.
Yeah, we're mostly handling it through hiring additional members or extending people to pick up an extra hour at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. One of the restrictions that we have is that we're not allowed to let other community members into our building outside of the people, just to reduce exposure. So I think volunteers, it's a hard
isn't
spot.
Much help.
Yeah, we do need a lot of help, but I think we have a good plan in place, and we have the people in the right spot to do the jobs that we need.
So the kids go to their usual pickup point.
Yep.
And at what point does the temperature routine happen?
So the supervisor union has passed out little quarter sheets of paper, and there's got the questions on there about whether or not you have any symptoms, whether or not you've been exposed to anyone with COVID-19, and then a temperature. So parents will be taking temperatures before, and they'll give this little sign-in sheet, and that'll be their entry ticket. We're also asking us to take temperatures at the point of first contact. So that'll either be as they enter the building or once they're on the bus. One of the things we can't do is stop kids outside of the bus and take every temperature and then send them back, and some of them don't have parents who are waiting at the bus stop. So once they're at the bus stop, they're our kids, and we'll take them on. And should someone have a high temperature, they would just sit in a different spot on the bus and be isolated at the school until someone could pick them up. But we do need to check temperatures as well.
And you're using the shotgun kind of
Yeah, we have to use the contactless one, but we're also making some thermometers available to families who need that at home if we're asking them to do it. they need to have the tools to do that.
Because
So
most
we
of
have,
the stores didn't even have them.
yeah, so we've been
So-
lucky. We've been able to, Lindy Perry, who's our nurse leader at the SU, has been able to work with the state, and they've allocated things to make things available for schools. So we've been able to work to get things like hand sanitizer, PPE, temp thermometer, stuff like that, so that we have everything that we need to start the
Are
school.
the families expected to provide their own masks?
Well, as part of our survey that went out a couple weeks ago, about 70% of families said that they would prefer to provide their own mask. As part of what we're doing, we're providing at least 2 cloth masks per kid available, because we know that there's going to be a kid who's going to drop this in the water puddle and need it. There's going to be a kid who does.
I've
so-
lost 3 this week.
Yeah, right. It happens. It
I
happens.
don't know where they've gone.
It's a whole nother part of your executive functioning to keep track
Right.
of where your mask is. Yeah, so we'll have to have some procedures in place for that. But the SU's been great.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Butterfield, who is Superintendent Castle's administrative assistant, has spearheaded a program where she's getting lots of masks into schools, at least 2 per kids of cloth masks. We'll have paper masks on the bus available to kids who show up who don't have a mask, so they can still get on the bus.
Or somebody's pulled it off their face and dropped it for them. Right.
One of our paraeducators has volunteered to make masks, so we've been paying. She's been great enough to do it. We've just been paying her for her supplies, and she's been
Great.
donating her time. So,
Wow.
I think the community really rallies in situations like this
Yeah.
where they know there's a need.
Right.
We've even had her put a mask on our mascot, so if you see the blue wolf walking around,
Oh, that's cool.
He's
Have you
even
seen
gonna
the
have a
fish
mascot.
down at
I did, yeah,
Newport
that's
building?
great.
Yeah.
They got that
and they
pretty early
they keep
on.
changing his mask.
Oh, have they? I haven't been that
Yeah.
observant.
We've seen 3 different ones.
Yeah.
And those are long masks.
It is a lot of
And
material.
I never knew fish had ears before, but apparently he does.
I hadn't noticed that either.
Right.
We don't teach that in school, I guess. So.
See, another lacking
I
subject.
know, right?
So the kids come off the bus, or they're dropped off by their parents,
Yep.
or they walk, and you take their temperatures, and they're in the school.
Yep.
What happens then?
So they're going to go directly to their classrooms. We've had to not have any congregating before or after school. So we've had,
Right.
in the past, we've had a bigger window where parents
Sure.
could drop kids off. We would supervise them in our lobby. They could hang out for 20 minutes until it was time to go to their classrooms. Now we're pretty much going to have to say, once you're in the building, that's a sign that you've passed your health screening, so you're safe to be there, and then you pretty much have to go straight to your classroom.
Right. What about breakfast?
Breakfast will be served in the classroom just like lunch, so it's another challenge for us
Yeah.
to do. Part of our system needs to adjust to that.
Sure.
But I feel confident. I met with our the Abbey Group representatives yesterday who provide our meal service, and we had a conversation about how that procedure will look and how we do composting and trash pickup and how we request meals in advance and all those things. We're working through it all.
God, so many details.
A lot.
So then the kids are in the classroom. Where are they sitting?
So it's going to vary a little bit based on age level and the grade level for kids. Typically, we're going to strive for 6 feet apart where we can.
Right.
And the guidance on that has changed throughout the summer. So recently we've got guidance for basically our pre-K through 5 students that it's 3 to 6 feet, 3 feet being acceptable, and 6 feet where it's possible. But you also know that we're going to have a classroom full of kids, and some kids are going to get excited and they're going to be in other kids' space.
Of course.
And so we're just going to have to be really deliberate about teaching that and not assuming that kids know that, and teach it like we would teach anything else.
Right.
We have responsive classroom in our school, and one of the things that you don't assume kids know how to do something.
Right.
You don't assume they know how to line up and go down the slide without going 2 or 3 at a time. You have to
Right.
teach that.
Pile.
So
Yeah.
it's the same for COVID, and so
Yeah.
we'll have to teach some of these new routines to kids, and even
Right.
us as adults will need to
Right.
learn new routines.
Particularly as if you watch the kids who are out and about in the neighborhoods, and they all are, they're running around, and that's great.
Yep.
They need to be.
They do.
But they're in little pods and packs as opposed to distance there.
Yeah.
So it really is going to be a whole new learning curve.
Yeah, it is. And so, I think you asked about classrooms, and I think, our kindergarten kids, when they're doing a morning meeting, they'll still be sitting on the ground. They'll
Yeah.
still be, maybe a little wider circle than we've
Yeah.
done in the past, but we're going to try to conduct business as close to normal as we can.
Yeah.
We
Will
have
there be
some
flexibility for the kids with masks?
when kids
It's
are
going
in,
to be hard for some kids.
yeah, we'll build flexibility in. Our pre-K students are not going to be required to wear masks.
Yeah.
I think developmentally that's a tough ask.
Right.
For some 3-year-olds all the way up to 5-year-olds. That's a tough thing to kind of be able to enforce and not have it be in your mouth, and then it
Right.
becomes, at a certain point it's more detrimental than
Exactly.
it does good.
Yeah.
But kindergarten through 6th grade, they're going to be wearing masks. They'll be wearing masks all day. One of the things that we've had to really think about is how do we build mask breaks into our day? How do we set up outdoor learning environments? How do we set up access to the outdoors? How do we build in breaks? It's been something we've done really intentionally,
Right.
and it's one of those things that I think as kids wear masks, the more they get used to it, the less
Yes.
of an issue it becomes.
Right. Your school has always done really well with things like recess and kids going out. You've been beautifully organized, and the kids are phenomenal playing together.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
It's going to look different. We've had to space our recesses out, so it means starting them a little bit earlier and going a little bit later in the day, because we're only sending one grade out at a time.
Right.
We can't send multiple grade bands out at the same time, just because of contamination. So right now we're in what step 2 of the state's plan, which means that we're really keeping cohorts together, and we're defining cohorts as classrooms.
Right.
Separate. Maybe in the future we can have whole grade bands interact with each other. We're hoping for that, because I think that's what's in kids' best interest developmentally, to go out and play with other peers and not
Absolutely.
just be exposed to a small group. But
Yeah.
right now we're not there. So we're sectioning our playground off into 3 zones. Each of the 3 homerooms will be in their zone. They'll be on the blacktop one day, they'll be on the playground one day, they'll be in the field the other day. We'll try to structure up activities so they know what the options are when they go
Right.
out. But right now we're kind of have to supervise them as 3 separate groups playing on the same playground. They'll be able to take their masks off as long as they stay outside and are
Sure.
socially distanced, so they can run around and be kids, and that's what we want them to do.
Exactly.
But we're going to have 10 minutes in between our recess groups that go out, so we can sanitize some of the playground equipment and have time for it to dry, so that we don't have kids going on wet equipment or equipment that has sanitizer on it, chemicals on
Right.
it. So, we've had to really refigure that out. It's been one of the challenges. I hope it goes smoothly, but it's like everything else. It's
There'll
something
be
we're likely to have to adjust
glitches,
to as
yeah.
we get into it.
There'll be glitches with bathrooms because, when nature calls,
Yeah,
kids go.
It's true, and we're going to limit bathrooms to 2 kids at a time. We're closing off the middle stall so that we can space kids out a little
Yeah.
bit. We have a system in place for doing that, but it is when you're dealing with little kids, when you're dealing with young people, it's things don't always go smoothly. So
They don't with adults.
yeah, it's true. It's I'm as guilty of that as anyone, I guess. But
Oh, we
yeah,
all.
you definitely have to. I think you have to have common sense approach to this.
Right.
One of the things that I've definitely heard throughout the summer from listening to some of the infectious disease pediatricians, especially the ones from the UVM, is that it's about risk mitigation.
Right.
When we send kids back to school, it's not going to be risk-free. There's inherent risk in doing it, but
In
it's our
life,
job
actually.
in life exactly. But
Yeah.
it's our job to try to keep risks, to minimize risk wherever we
Right.
can. So we're taking every step that we can to try to reduce prolonged contact, to have social
Right.
distancing, to wear masks, and do all those things. Wash hands, the things that we have been told are the right steps to do.
Right. And the pediatricians have been very clear. It's important for the kids to get back to whatever normal is and to be back with other kids.
Yeah, the American Academy of Pediatricians
Yeah,
released
they're
a
really
report,
clear.
and it was very clear. Kids need to get back.
Yes.
I think Newport City has really taken social emotional learning and the mental health of our children as our number 1 priority. If
Yeah.
kids don't have some security with how they're feeling and how they're not going to be available for instruction.
No.
And so
not
it's the
at
same
all.
thing. We feel like we serve a very important role in the community for young people and for families. That this is a place where they can go. We can establish routines and norms. We provide meals twice a day. We have access to guidance counselors. We have access to a lot of resources that kids need.
Right.
And so it's really important for us that we get kids back. It's really important for us as teachers that we see
Right.
our children again,
Right.
and we see them.
And Newport City School kept some of the kids in the school until well into June.
We had
You had a program there.
we reopened for our summer encore program.
Yeah.
So most of the state chose not to do that,
But
and
you kept it
the
going.
the Northeast Kingdom, Newport, and the rest of the supervisory union ran a lot of encore programs.
Which
and
was great.
It was great. It was good to get a handful of kids back. It was also really great for us to be able to just see how kids are going to respond to wearing a mask, see how kids are going to respond to social
Right.
distancing and some of those things. So
Yeah,
in a way, it gave us some information to help.
I talked to one of your staff over the summer. We know each other in another context.
Yeah.
And she'd worked throughout the program, and apparently it went really well.
It did. It was a success, and we
Yeah.
found that once, there's a learning curve with kids, but once they were in the
Right.
building, they adjusted. They were able to figure it out. So that's been really important information. So when we get together as a leadership team and review our procedures, we've included some of those folks
Yeah.
to have that input.
Will there be an after-school program?
As of right now, we're planning on having an after-school program. It would probably start in a couple of weeks after school begins,
Right.
just like it has in the past. There'll be some challenges about intermingling kids and from different cohorts and that
Right.
type of stuff. I think we can spread them out. We might have to access more spaces within our building.
At least you have the spaces.
We do have the spaces, and we have the staff to do it. So I think
Right.
one of the challenges for us is that we've also are requiring additional custodial support just to do all the cleansing
I'm sure.
that we've needed to do. So I was actually just doing interviews this morning. We're hiring an additional custodian to come in and help with some of the sanitizing. If you think about all the things that need to happen in a day, everyone in our building who's employed there
Right.
is running a tight schedule. We're all busy. No one's standing
I was
around.
going to say, that school budget we all voted on?
Right, I can assure the
Out
taxpayers
the window.
that we are working hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to have to add a custodian just to help with that. And
Yeah.
hopefully it has a minimal impact on our school budget. Hopefully we can access some CARES funding or COVID funding or ESSER funding that's
Yeah.
designed to help provide some relief for COVID-related expenses.
Can some of the COVID funding provide home learning equipment, like computers for the kids who don't have them? Or
Yeah, so
internet access for the kids who don't have any?
I don't know about internet access. Some of the local internet service providers have offered programs there at a reduced rate. And
Yeah.
We've definitely worked with some of our families to connect them to those resources.
Good.
And I think a lot of those had initially were only for a couple of months, and I think they've been extended so as kids have the potential to have to go back to remote learning. I hope they don't, but there's that
Right.
potential that hopefully they have those resources. We've used some funds. We got a grant through the Vermont Principals Association.
Mm-hmm.
We've used some other additional funds to purchase 115 new Chromebooks to have in our school, so that we
Right.
have better closer to a one-to-one course relationship with technology for our kids.
Right.
But
Do you
it's
have
like anything else. The Chromebooks aren't here yet. We're
Right.
waiting for them, but they're coming. There's a high demand for a lot of the stuff that we
And
need.
do you have technological support for things like Chromebooks? Because you and I both know that computers are forever producing little
We
problems.
do. We contract with the supervisory union, and we've had really good support through
That's
there.
great.
Yeah. We've also there's the support for the device, but there's also the support for
The
trying to
using
use
it.
the learning platforms that we're having teachers
Yeah.
and kids have to use, and so we've had good support with that. One of the differences from remote learning is that it happened really quickly, and there wasn't a lot of time to prepare.
Right.
One of the things that we've taken time throughout emergency learning and through the summer is to try to be more intentional about planning and making sure that we have the right platforms in place to make sure that we have access for our kids and
Right.
our teachers, to make sure that when we post assignments, that we're posting assignments online and we're giving the assignment to the kid in person, so
Yeah.
that should we need to go to remote learning,
Mhm.
the kids are familiar with how to use those tools,
Right.
and that information is already established.
That's really good. The kids who have developmental difficulties
Yeah.
or other not mainstream challenges.
Sure.
Because all the kids have challenges. They certainly do.
We all as human beings have things we're working through.
That's right.
So.
Exactly. But some of your kids being out of school for as long as they've been out has been really harmful.
Yes.
I mean, there's no gift wrapping it. It has really been difficult. Are they going to be able to get the extra help that they're going to need?
I certainly hope so. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that we're trying to do is be proactive about providing social emotional learning supports for
Right.
all of our kids. So at that tier 1 level, at that universal access level, this has been stressful for everyone. This has been
Right.
anxiety producing for everyone, and it's not always the kids who maybe have a hard time at school. It's
Right.
been really hard for even some of our families who do have resources, who do have
Right.
access to internet, who do have a parent who could stay home with them. It's still been really stressful. So we're trying to put those systems in place for all kids. We're trying to provide the proper coaching for our teachers to be able to
Right.
do some of that. But yeah, we're also having plans for how do we respond to kids who are going to come in crisis? How are we going to respond to kids who've been away from structure for a period of time?
And
Like
whose parents are now struggling financially because the so-called benefits that everybody got were a joke, to put it mildly. Many of those, quote, benefits didn't arrive until way after the fact, and by then the families were drowning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just the stress of having to
Yeah.
go through all of this, and
And asking parents who are not teachers to become teachers,
yeah, we're asking them to facilitate some of the learning for sure.
which they didn't know themselves.
Yeah, we're not trying to. Our intention is never to try to ask the parent to be the teacher. But we
Support
do
the kids.
when the students are not in our building. There's certainly an obstacle there
Right.
of we need kids to be able to log on. We need kids to be able to be available, and that's an ask
Right.
for parents. It
And
is.
the child has an issue with, quote, new math, and they ask the available adult. I mean, I checked out some of that new math. You have got to be joking.
It's the math is, and this goes back for years, for a couple
Right.
of years now. Math, we've really moved away from solving things through a standard algorithm where we have a process, but we don't necessarily understand why we're carrying a 1 or why we're doing this or
Right.
that. We've moved more to conceptually understanding what you're doing, which I think is the right way to go. But for those of us who learned a certain way, I can tell you how to do it, but it's not the way that you're being taught how to do it.
Right,
That's
exactly.
that's been going on for years. It's something that but it is.
And it may ultimately make sense, but if that hasn't been explained to the adults need to be learning
Right.
what the kids are learning.
Well, and it goes back to something I said about teachers just want to do a good job, and the same holds
Yeah.
true for parents. I know
Absolutely.
that all of our parents want to do the best for their kid, and even when they're struggling with new math or that
Right.
type of stuff, it's not because they don't want to do a good job.
Exactly.
And so that's where some of that anxiety comes out. Is just anyone who wants to do a good job but doesn't feel like they have the tools to do it,
Right.
or feel like they have the expertise to do it. That's stressful because you care about your kid,
And you were
that's,
home
Yeah.
with your kids,
Yes, I was.
expecting to be their teacher, their support person, their whatever, but you still had your own day job to do.
Yeah, and for me,
Crazy.
the internet access at my own house wasn't very
Right.
good, so I was frequently leaving them to kind of fend for themselves and come into work and then go back and check on them, and and that's a really inadequate feeling for me as a parent to
Of
know that I'm
course.
putting my kids in that spot. So I definitely sympathize with what a lot of our parents are going through.
And the whole issue of what do you do with your kids, because there are all these legal constraints about who you can leave at home and for what period of
Right.
time, some of which is totally insane. However, you're held to that just as everybody else is.
Yeah, and I'm lucky
And-
enough to have kids who are old enough, and I was lucky enough to have in-laws who could stop by the house and check on them.
You were lucky.
Yeah, so that's definitely a privilege that
Not true
I
for
had, but that's not
everybody.
true for everyone. And so
Yeah.
it's definitely a stress, and if the parents are feeling it, the kids are as well.
Sure. What percentage of the kids are not going to come back to the physical building, but who are going to continue with remote learning? Because that's an option, right?
It is an option. It's an option that was presented about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, so we, on a typical school year, pre-K through 6th grade, we have
Mhm.
about 360 kids in our building.
Mhm.
Virtual learning wasn't an option for preschool, so we had 22 kids sign up for remote learning, for virtual learning, we're calling it,
Yeah.
which is the more intentional year-long commitment to doing
Wow.
to learning from home. We had 22 kids sign up for that. We have another handful of kids who are on a waiting list to see if that'll be an option for them. So
And
I
if
think
it's
that's
not
less
an
than the
option-
SU had in terms of percentage of kids.
Yeah. If it's not an option, do they have to come back to the school?
So yeah, so if it's not an option, then they'll have to come back to school. I mean, homeschooling and
Right.
going through the state to have a state-approved homeschooling
Right.
plan is always an option. But
Yeah.
in terms of
That's
what we would be providing, it would be in-person
Yeah,
instruction.
that's a challenging plan. I mean,
It is. And it
it's a
doesn't
lot
work
of
for all families.
administrative hoops, right?
There is, yeah.
And there are so many different pathways for homeschooling that unless a parent has already really done his or her homework with that.
Right. And the approval
lot to
process takes a
figure out.
while. So, but I think we're going to have, we've worked with parents. I've spent a lot of time this past week on the phone with parents, talking through options, talking through plans, trying to get things set up. And I think I foresee that continuing even when school starts.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah. What about teachers?
You know, I think teachers, by and large, are in this profession because they love being with kids and they want to be with kids. So I think they're excited to get back. I think they're anxious. I think the reality has shifted for everyone. So I think there's some concerns about how things are going to work. But teachers want to be with kids.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and most families really want to get back to some semblance of normal.
Yeah.
Back to their own day jobs.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the things that we've, as we've come up with our plans for this year, we've really tried to focus on is how do we keep things as normal as possible.
Right.
So we're going to have social distancing that will feel different. We'll have masks on, that'll feel different. But what are the things that we can do to really help kids get back into that routine? You know, when you're stressed or when you're anxious, being able to fall into a familiar or comfortable routine can be a real calming influence on your body and on your mind. So we're really trying to do that to the best that we can. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really happy that you're all so enthusiastic about it, and obviously I talked to Elaine as well.
Yeah.
And a couple of your teachers I've spoken to as
Yeah.
well. You're all enthusiastic, and that's half the battle.
I think that's the only way you approach it. I mean, this is the reality. It's out of our control. So we're going to make the best out of it, and we're going to try to do what's right for kids and do what's right by each other as coworkers and do what's right by the community.
Yeah, and the good news for the rest of us sitting out there in the community is we really want normal too, whatever normal is or is going to be. And the more we see it around us, the more we sort of take a deep breath and let go of some of the stress.
Absolutely.
That's been one of the pleasures of seeing kids running around all summer.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it's normal. They're not hiding from each other because we've all become so scared of each other.
Right.
That's really not healthy.
It is. It's a balance you have to strike between being, a reasonable level of cautiousness.
You can be reasonable, you can be cautious. You don't have to be scared of each other.
But not have that fear in.
Right.
And so that's part of when we teach things about new procedures, we'll be really deliberate about trying to teach them in a way that is giving kids, empowering them as to why these decisions are being made, and having them have a good sense of understanding about you don't need to be scared, of a kid, and you don't need to, but we are going to give space.
Right.
And so there is that kind of, we'll have to be really deliberate of how we message that to children.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That actually is really useful for the future as well.
Yeah.
Because learning to set your own space and your own limits and your own boundaries is really useful for other aspects of life as well.
Yeah.
That sometimes it's harder to teach.
Right, and I think that's one thing we do really well as a school is really intentionally teach the things that we want kids to know. We don't assume that they're going to have that knowledge. So if we expect them to learn how to use the slide properly, we're going to take the time to teach them how to use the slide properly.
Right.
If we want them to learn the new lunchtime routine, then we need to be really intentional about how we teach that. We don't assume that kids have that when they come to school. So that's our job. That's what I think something we do well.
You do. You do. Your school has done some wonderful things over the last few years.
And I think that's really what gives, you talked about enthusiasm. That's what makes me excited. What gives me the enthusiasm is I know that we have systems in place that are going to be able to respond. We have really, really good people who work in our building. We have excellent teachers. We have excellent support staff. We have excellent social emotional staff, administrative staff. that we're going to be in a position where we're going to be able to do the best for kids. And like I've heard, like Superintendent Castle has talked about, the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, if any place is safe enough to open up for in-person instruction, it's us.
Here.
We've had really good numbers.
Exactly.
I hope that opening schools back up doesn't influence that in a negative way. But we're going to go into it. We have excellent people who I have the utmost of respect and trust for. We're going to put them in a position to succeed and then let them do what they do best. And
That's great.
I'm excited about that. How could you not be?
Right. Well, on that note, we're out of time. Told you it goes really fast.
Yeah, super fast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
This will be out on NEK-TV very soon.
Great.
And it will be made available as a YouTube video for anybody who can't access the TV station. Speaking of access to things equally.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.